Hello everyone. This is another episode of What Makes This Track Tick, where I take a track and analyze it, put it through the analyzing machine, which is this Ableton template. I call it a machine. It's actually very simple idea. Put a track on the first audio track here and listen to it carefully. Try and hear all the different parts that exist in the track, and then make little dummy MIDI clips to see where they are occurring. This is very useful for analyzing the arrangement, and so this is what I did today with the track State of Pressure by Lewis Fautzi. So Lewis Fautzi, very talented Portuguese producer. This track was released on Soma Records on 7th of September, so about 2.5 months ago. I chose this one because it's the type of track that I'm really into and that I wanted to know a little bit more about how it works. It'll become clear as we just dive into it and get started analyzing this track. So again, I imported the audio into Live so we can easily hear it and have it on the timeline here. It's 134 BPM hypnotic techno track, and I'll just play the first part. So as you can hear and see, there's quite a bit going on in this first intro section, but actually very little is changing. And one of the things that is interesting to me about this type of track is sort of figuring out how a producer can get away with that without it becoming extremely boring and repetitive. Of course, this is also in part subjective, because if you're not into this type of techno music, then maybe you still think it's really boring and repetitive, and why is anyone listening to this? And of course you could argue, well, this is made for the dance floor, but at the same time, these tracks are also listened to outside the dance floor, and they need to have enough stuff going on at all times and able to keep the listeners' interest. Even if they are into very repetitive music. So let's just analyze a few of the tracks. I actually, quote unquote, recreated a few of the parts. So beforehand, my apologies, they don't sound anything alike, but I wanted to focus on the bass. So I recreated a kick, which of course is a simple 4 to the floor kick, and the bass part. And the way I did this is it is an octave, C sharp, 2 octaves, and when you listen to the original, there is this rhythm going on in the bass. That's what you hear. Sorry for my singing. So I made this, the top layer has this dun, 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 rhythm, and then the lower one sounds to me like just long quarter notes with a sidechain on them. This is one of the things that can be very difficult to discern what is actually going on in the lowest registers of a track. And it takes careful listening. It takes a system that can handle these low frequencies to able to hear what's going on. I don't have a club on hand where I can just go and play on a very large system and hear exactly what's going on the speakers this big. So we have to make do, but this is sort of what it sounds like. So together with the kick, that's more or less what it is. But of course, with all the production values going into this, it then sounds like this. Of course, the kick is not identical, the bass not identical. It's more about finding out the patterns that were used. Okay, and then onto these purple, violet tracks here. And this is a layered thing with one or two synths. I think it's two. And then a noisy part that sort of doubles the first synth part. So let's have a listen. I'll start it a little bit later here. You can hear these high notes that I try to recreate, sort of actually with the velocity of the notes here swelling, sort of coming and going. There's a second part that I didn't try to recreate. This has more of like a voice-like quality with a filter that opens and closes, and it's sort of a ooh, ee, ah sort of a sound. Let's see if you can hear that. This becomes more obvious over time as the track evolves, as stuff is being automated. You can see no parts are really coming or going here. It's all automation in these synth parts. See the notes here, those are opening up the filter, or they're becoming louder. And then here, and now this also could be the tuned noise, that sort of voice-like thing, because there is this sort of noise sequence, but I think they are separate parts. And again, this is just really tricky because of all the layering, and that's why this track is interesting. You'll find later with the percussion, the hi-hats and stuff, a similar thing going on. It's actually quite difficult to discern which are the separate parts. It's really difficult to know which part is doing what, or actually which parts are there in the first place. Is it one synth with several oscillators and a noise source? Are it several synths? Are it a bunch of samples? Who knows? They're sort of all moving together and opening up towards the part here. So this part called noise sequence moves with these other two parts. Again, maybe it's just an oscillator in a synth of the other parts, or maybe it's a separate thing. This is definitely more a separate sounding thing, noise accent, which is a cool 3-bar pattern. Let's see what that sounds. Let's see if you can pick that out. It's actually easier to discern earlier in the track. For instance, here. That sort of seems to move together with this sort of voice-like filtered synth that also sounds to me like a 3-bar pattern, where the variation is coming by the changing character of the filtering, which sort of reminiscent of a voice. This is then a more regular sort of white noise rhythmic part. You hear it padding left to right. If you're not listening on headphones or good speakers, you'll miss that, but it's sort of going back and forth. I sort of recreated it to give you an idea. So together with first. That sounds embarrassingly weak compared to the original, but it's to give you an idea. And then the reason why I labeled this part a different color is because it sort of rises in intensity with a filter opening or something like that, or maybe some, I think there's some delay coming in, some automation going on, and the same in the break here, and that gives that effect. Let's just go here, yeah. And finally, after 48 bars, 3 16-bar blocks, we get some percussion action. This starts here at the start of every 8-bar block, more or less from now on. And then this is what I called snares 16th. Sort of sounds like a high pass filtered snare. All the time, by the way, we have had this simple shaker. It's just a simple 8-note pattern. This thing that I called stick left, you can hear in your left ear sort of like a wooden stick, and then there's a very subtle thing in the right ear, a sort of, well, noisy sample. So all that's been more or less static, and then now finally we get some more percussion in 8-bar blocks. This is quite subtle layering. Here's a 16-note pattern added, and here there's another one. I think. Sort of builds these layers, again, hard to discern everything. This is an approximation of what I think is going on. Then we go to a break. I actually made a little mistake here. I left the kick and the sub out. There is actually some going on. It's fading out very quickly. Noisy part, sort of rising up. Everything else is still lifting out. And we're back where we started, more or less, although not so much as the beginning, because the filters on the synths are more open. And this continues for a while. And you can hear what carries this is really quite a long loop going on in the main parts of the synth. It's sort of a short and a long loop at the same time. It's the same thing repeating, but with different settings, I think, on the filter, this voice-like filter thing that I keep talking about. And that keeps changing and shifting. And also the fact that it's a 3-bar pattern against what is normally, of course, a 4 and 8-bar situation creates this variety. Again, here with some 16th notes percussive stuff added in and not much else changing. fast. And the difference really between this last part and this is the less noisy sound of what I think is this sequence. And again, starting some, because of elements that weren't there, stopping them, all the while doing this without creating too much contrast. It's all quite subtle, it's all very layered. It gives this effect where it's exactly the same thing happening all the time, but it's actually not precisely the same. It's the same part, but it's in a different form, and it's subtle, but it is enough to keep sort of the mind occupied and not completely zoning out. Then the final part here, there's a change in the timing of this noise accenting, which is sort of interesting. It has been a 3-bar pattern. Now it's a 4-bar pattern. Maybe this isn't even an extra part. Maybe it's still part of this. Again, for the last time, it's very difficult to hear sort of the different parts, separate them out. But anyway, things are winding down here. This last of the 60th notes pattern, hi-hats that's left here is fading out, leaving only the shaker hi-hat, I call it. Here you can hear the noisiness going down here. And together with this part. Can't really hear it anymore. Here may very well be that it just stopped here, or maybe even earlier. So, apparently not a lot going on. Limited number of sounds, although there are probably a few buried in there that I didn't separate out that do sort of add to the ambience. That's what a lot of this music is about. It's this sort of tapestry of sounds that are woven together in quite an intricate way. With subtle changes throughout, no big transitions, but just shifting, moving, along all the time. Something is always happening, but it's never too completely obvious. So I hope you enjoyed this, that it was useful, inspiring maybe to make your own stuff, ideas for how to make better music. If you're into this kind of music, maybe some hints about how to do subtle changes, keeping the interest going. I hope it does that for you. It was certainly interesting for me to analyze this track. So thank you very much for watching. I shall see you on the next one. Bye bye.